Hello everyone, welcome to Tortoise for our weekly and now at 6:30 live open news meeting. I'm a virgin for these. I'm standing in for James, our founder, who is having a well-earned break. So I'm just getting used to the fact that you're all over there as far as I'm concerned, and I'm supposed to look at that. And as I was just saying, it is the moment when I really realize I need bifocals, because that's fine, I can see you there, but this, I have to take my glasses off. Anyway, as you know, if you've been to one of these before, we are basically on the hunt for stories. So we're going to be asking everybody, Tortoise, my colleagues, staffers, Tortoise members, and we've got some guests as well, what they're up to. And I'm just going to scribble, and I hope everyone will scribble and pile into the chat when you think there's a story that we need to be covering, and we'll just try to talk about it as if you were all here in the room. We have a few people who actually are in the room with us, which is very nice of you. But we will chew over a little bit about this week's main Tortoise Slow newscast, and I think one of the people on the call, Poppy Seaback Montefiore, can tell us a bit about how that came to be and where we might go with that from here. I hope that in the course of the hour we can talk also about football, and even if there's time, Love Island, and we'll get to that. But first, without more ado, because we've got some guests with real serious preoccupations, I want to come to them. We run the Tortoise Network to bring Tortoise journalism to people who might not otherwise have access to it. And a recent partner who's joined the network is Centrepoint, the charity for homeless people, and with an emphasis on young homeless people. And I would like first, if possible, to hear from you guys. Billy Harding, I hope, is on the call. Because Billy, you are Senior Policy and Research Officer at Centrepoint. And you've got a peer group research project going. And I wonder if, Billy, hello, nice to see you. Thanks for joining us. If you could start by telling us what the peer group research does and the particular problems that you and the people that you help that you've encountered over the course of the pandemic. And I believe that you in particular have been focusing on universal credit and the importance of the uplift. Tell us a bit about that too, if you can.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, before that, I'll just say a few words about Centrepoint, so who we are. So we're a national youth homelessness charity supporting young people aged between 16 and 25 who are homeless or at risk of homelessness. And we're just over, I think we're 52 years old. So we're established in 1969 as an emergency night shelter for young people who are sleeping rough in the streets of London. So Reverend of the St Anne's Church in Soho basically opened up the crypt to young people who otherwise would have nowhere else to stay, and kind of built support around that, around any additional needs. And then since then, over 50 years, we've grown into a national youth homelessness charity supporting young people across England. So based in London, Yorkshire, Manchester and Sunderland. And we provide kind of accommodation-based support, so things like hostels and foyers and semi-independent accommodation for young people who wouldn't have those other housing options. And then from that, we kind of build support around, employability, education and training, as well as mental and physical health needs, with a view to, supporting young people move on from homelessness and into independence and into their own accommodation. So that's a bit about Centrepoint and who we are. So my role, I'm a Senior Policy and Research Officer. So effectively trying to, influence the government and influence various different stakeholders, so national government, local government, corporate partners, to basically, change policy to better support young people who might be going through homelessness or at risk of homelessness. And so we do this by conducting research into key issues that affect young people going through homelessness. So things like access to housing, the benefit system, social security, and also kind of access to education, employment and training. And one piece of work that we're looking at the moment is looking at the social security system for homeless young people. So of the young people who support a Centrepoint, the benefit system, universal credit, housing benefit are such vital lifelines. These are young people that don't have access to financial support from family or friends, in the same way that other people in that age group may do. So the benefit system is so vital as a way of for them to access housing and meet essential living costs. But we know there's real challenges around the benefit system, particularly around universal credit, in terms of overall low benefit rates for young people, the way it's paid, the way it's managed, the support available from the job centre. So the current project we're working on at the moment is a peer research project looking at universal credit and looking at housing benefit, and the benefit system more generally, how it's working for young people who might be going through homelessness or facing housing insecurity. So we have a team of fantastic young people who are peer researchers who've undergone some training, and a couple of them are on the call with us today. And basically they've been going out conducting a national survey of young people who have experienced homelessness, have been interviewing key stakeholders and other young people to really drill into the issues around where the benefit system does need improving for young people. And we're hoping to publish this piece of research with a range of recommendations about the key changes that young people need to see, particularly those who are facing homelessness. Excuse me.
Billy, when are you going to publish it?
So looking at September, October time. I haven't got a date confirmed yet, but yeah, looking at publishing that and around the time that the government is proposing to end the additional £20 uplift to universal credit. And as you can imagine, a key emerging finding from the research is that benefit levels for young people. So I don't know if you're aware that if you're under 25, the basic rate of universal credit is about £15 a week less than it is if you're over 25. And this is basically premised on the idea that most young people will be living with family or with other carers, and so won't have the same financial responsibilities, and thus don't need the same level of benefits. But the young people we support at Centrepoint don't have access to that financial support and whatsoever, and as a result the lower benefit rates puts them in real financial hardship, which is why we think it's critical that firstly the £20 uplift is made permanent. We've had decades of reduction in value to social security benefits. So I think an analysis by the Resolution Foundation suggests that if benefit levels are dropped back by the £20 a week, they'll be at their lowest real terms value since the early 90s. So again, for young people who have those lower benefit entitlements as well, this is just will make it really, really difficult. So this is why we're doing the research, to really show the impact of what the uplift has meant for young people, and what taking away could mean as well as making the case for a wider range of changes around the benefit system for young people.
Okay, Billy, thank you very much. It would be great if we can hear from the two young people who you mentioned who've come along too. I mean, no compulsion, but there's no substitute for first-hand experience, and not just of homelessness or sofa surfing, but of the work that they're doing in the peer research. But just briefly, Billy, or I think you have a colleague, Paul, along. Can you just give us an idea in terms of headline figures of the change over the course of the pandemic, if there has been one, in the number of people that you're helping and that you believe to be sort of out there in the country at large, effectively homeless?
So I think in general terms, so we do a piece of research every year, the Youth Homelessness Data Bank, which tries to assess basically how many young people across the UK are either homeless or at risk of homelessness. So we ask every local authority about how many young people are coming forward for housing assistance. And basically the last project we did on that was back in 2019-20, so just before the pandemic. And we found that over 120,000 young people approached their local authority for housing help. And we're really concerned this has only gotten worse over the pandemic, particularly as things like the suspension of evictions draw to a close. But in terms of the impact on our own services, I'm probably best handing over to my colleague Paul, who manages our helpline, and talk about what we've been seeing on the front line.
That would be great. Paul, is Paul with us on the call?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone.
Oh, fine.
Yes, so I run Centrepoint's national helpline. So we support young people right the way across the country, very often at the point of crisis. Our typical call is, I've been kicked out of home. I don't know where I'm going to stay tonight. What do I do? Unfortunately, over the crisis, we've had our busiest ever year with calls up a third on the previous year. young people are under so much extra pressure at the moment. There's been a lot of loss of jobs that employ a lot of young people, places like hospitality and retail that have had to close or furlough staff. So we've seen a massive increase. And I mean, you mentioned sofa surfing. Unfortunately, what we've seen with all the isolation rules and that a lot of young people have found they've not been able to sofa surf, or they've had a lot fewer options because staying with friends for the odd night just hasn't been possible. So unfortunately, we're seeing an increase in rough sleepers as well. So unfortunately, yeah, we're seeing a huge demand that's not yet tapered off yet. I mean, we're waiting to see what happens as the economy opens, but also we know that furlough scheme is ending, and that might well impact young people. And the ban on evictions is gradually being wound down as well. So we think there's a good chance that people that have fallen behind on their rent are also at risk of homelessness.
Paul, just remind us, what is the age range that is falling through the cracks, as it were, in terms of at risk of no longer getting the uplift or not getting it now? And you said calls up a third, but what about in absolute numbers? Do we have a sense of how many young people we're talking about? Are we talking tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands?
So our helpline supported just under 7,000 young people last year, but we know that's scratching the surface. We're not a big helpline that's well known like Childline or Shelter, so we know that we're going to be only getting a small fraction of those young people. In terms of the age range, more generally, I mean, we do hear calls from young people as young as 14 or 15 on occasion. What we find is that young people under 18 are generally reasonably well looked after by the system. There's a duty on social services. It can get a little bit harder at 17, and that's where perhaps there's a little, they tend to fall through the cracks, but pretty much as soon as they turn 18, unless there's any special circumstances, what we find is they simply don't have access to help. And what help there is very difficult for young people to access. If they've never done it before, they've never accessed landlords, they've never spoken to councils before. It's a real bureaucratic nightmare to navigate. So part of what we do is try and talk them through that as best we can.
Okay, thank you very much. So as I said, I don't want to force anyone to talk who doesn't want to, but you mentioned, Billy, a couple of the people who Centrepoint helps. If you're on the call and would like to tell us about the experience of doing the research or any other experiences that you've had with Centrepoint or before coming to Centrepoint, if you know how to raise your electronic hand, do so, and we'll. Yes, I'm sorry.
Hi.
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 Nice to see you. What's your name?
I'm Morgan. I'm one of the peer researchers.
Okay. Will you tell us about how you came to be doing it?
Yes, so pretty much I'm still in service. I've been in service for about 3 years now. I became homeless around the age of 19. And pretty much since I, went into Centrepoint service, I sort of started working with them from the start. So pretty much before then, I was homeless for about a year, most of the time spending that year on the streets. Or if I managed to find somewhere to surf, I would, take that opportunity. But sadly for me, I don't really know many people around here anymore, since, my original family home's quite far away from where I am now. But pretty much for like the last year and a half now, I've been focusing a lot as a bit of a volunteer for Centrepoint. So doing work with them, with both their media team and their peer research team or their policies team. And like Billy said earlier, we've had a small group of young people alongside Billy, basically focusing on trying to, gather research to either provide that research to, the government, MPs, or just other charities to try and pretty much build awareness and, like make people realize, like how much support young people need in terms of benefits, trying to find them home in or anything else. And I've actually got quite a lot of the survey research or, like quite a lot of the feedback that we've got. And I can happily go through quite a bit of it with you if you would like that.
Yeah, we would love to know. I mean, can you sort of pick out 2 or 3 points that have really stood out from the research? I mean, it sounds like this is a big subject that we could devote a lot of time to, and we should have a further in-depth discussion on. But what's really stood out from talking to other young people?
I mean, for me personally, like, because I've gone through the situation, I'm still classed as homeless. It's quite a personal thing to me, and that's why I'm doing the work. But one of the main things that stood out for me is pretty much one of the feedbacks that we got was fewer than 1 in 10 young people think that the benefit levels are enough for a decent quality of life. And that's out of 158 young people that we surveyed. And about only 16% of young people say that their benefit levels are enough to get by on. So 16% out of that 158 people, like are straight up saying, look, we need more to live on. We're getting around, for me personally, I get around £320 a month to live on. Majority of that either goes on either electric, water bills, or just general necessities such as food and all that. And I'll say about eight or nine, about 8 or 9 attempts out of the time each month, I'm usually ending up skin throughout like 3 weeks out of that month is to the point where I'm becoming skin because I just haven't got enough to live on.
Are you eligible for the £20 uplift?
Yeah, and I do get that £20 uplift, but from what we've heard from the government, they're planning to take that away from us in September. And I don't think they necessarily realise how much £20 can mean to a young person, because to me, that's a week's worth of food in my fridge. And, like taking away something like that can actually mean a lot more than people would think. Because, at the end of the day, there's people who are even managing to claim benefits that are still on the street and still starving or don't have a roof over my head. And I consider myself lucky because of Centrepoint and the support that they give me.
Morgan, thank you. I know that you've got sort of data points there. Is there anything else that you want to share with us now? I mean, I think the best use of time is that we invite you in, or we arrange a call where we can go through the research that you've done paragraph by paragraph. We'd love the scoop on your study before you publish it in September. But is there anything else that really stands out?
I mean, there's so much I could go through, and I would really enjoy to actually be able to come in and, go through all of the work, especially alongside Billy, because, the work that me and Billy have been doing does mean not just a lot to me, but, it means a lot to a lot of other people. Like, it's not just me that's homeless in this country. There is so many other young people that need to be taken into consideration. But, just looking through the results that we've got, almost half of those young people that we surveyed basically say that they have to go to, food banks or have to have access to emergency food support to get through that month, just because they're not earning, well, I can't say earning, but they're not getting enough from the government. So, yeah, there is a lot I could talk about, but, with the time that I've got, I can't cover it all.
No, I can. Did you say a third are reliant on food banks to get through every month?
No, a half. So half of that survey that we did all say that, they need access to emergency food supplies to basically get through that month.
And what about you personally, Morgan? Do you regularly need to access food banks?
I've had to in the past. I mean, I am starting to manage my money a lot more, but it's got to a point now because of the fact that I can't necessarily work because of my mental health, which is another big focus within Centrepoint, is, working with people that got mental health issues, anxiety, depression, because they can't physically go out and find work, which is one of our main focuses, to get them work. But to the point where I have now tried to push forward to claim PIP as a benefit. You know, I shouldn't be having to do it in the first place, and I shouldn't be having to take out advancements because I'm waiting like what I think is 5 weeks before I can get my first payment when I started off with Universal Credit. And that is another one thing that we looked at, and I can't remember what the statistic is, but we know for a fact that majority of people that start off with Universal Credit are somewhat forced to take out an advancement because they just can't simply wait for the money, you know, like to be paid into their bank account after those 5 weeks. And necessarily, we shouldn't be having to wait, you know, like we need the support, and we shouldn't be, you know, like having to basically put ourselves into debt to actually get a hold of that money. But yeah, at the end of the day, there's so much I can talk about, but, you know, it's something that not just we need to focus on, but, you know, like as a whole, we all need to focus on it.
Well, Morgan, thank you. There are a lot of people saying in the chat how brave and how important it is that you're coming forward and saying all this, not to mention doing all the work that you're doing, quantifying it. And as I say, we would love to know more about that. My colleague Dave is mentioning in the chat that it would be great to commission what we call a slow view, basically a first-person piece about the work that you're doing. If possible, and I know that we're already running sort of behind, can we come to Mitak?
Yep.
Hi there. Mitak, thanks very much for joining us. Let me look at the right camera, I do apologise. Tell us how you came to be working with Centrepoint.
So I became homeless when I was about 16, and I was having a lot of issues trying to get into care, and I had to really fight for my place to be in care, to be looked after. And luckily I had Centrepoint, and I had my lawyers to help me, you know, challenge the local borough to take me in. So even when I did go in, I had a lot of issues with money and dealing with mental health and other issues, trying to just figure out where I want to be. And I was constantly on the move after I left my foster parents' house. So I think Centrepoint made it quite easy for me to transition from semi-independent living to now having my own place. And I think because I was quite driven anyways, and I've always been motivated to do things, I kind of always pushed, you know, to get things done. And I noticed a lot of young people around me, they didn't really do that because they had a lot of issues going on. And, you know, not everyone is so driven and motivated because of what life has put them through. So it makes it harder for them to go and fight for things, and we shouldn't be fighting for these things. But I feel like a lot of the time I had to, you know, fight for my payments, fight for my house, to just get a job. And a lot of the time it was just a big struggle. But yeah, I mean, that's how Centrepoint has helped me since then.
Mitak, how old are you now? And give us a quick sense of how the pandemic specifically has affected your life.
I'm 23 now, and I mean, I've got my own business. I've written books and done a lot of talks, so I'm doing quite a lot for myself. And with the pandemic, yeah, it was quite hard at the start because we was all unsure of, you know, where we wanted to go down the path, and it made it quite hard, and especially because a lot of young people are by themselves, like me, and we don't have family support and other people around us to make sure that we have security. So it all depends on us, which kind of makes it a bit more harder for us to get things done, to do things, and to really focus on what we want to do rather than focus on, you know, paying bills and rent or having that fear of getting kicked out.
Well, Mitak, now is your time to plug the book and the business. What does the business do, and what's the name of the book or books?
So I run a digital marketing and branding company.
And branding?
Yeah. And yeah, my book is about my life, about my past, the experiences that I've had. I read the book when I was 14. I was living in a room and I was going through a lot of things, and I was very suicidal at the time, so I didn't know a way to deal with it. So I started writing, and it helped me deal with all my problems and figure out solutions and have a new perspective on life. And it just grew me as a person. So I wrote the book in hopes that it could help other people. And yeah, it kind of where everything came into fruition, where I have big goals now to, owning my island one day and building a city and doing a lot more for society and the youth. Yeah.
Fantastic. What is the title of the book?
It's called Mitak's Incomplete.
Mitak's Incomplete.
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
You can stick the details in the chat if you want. Look, thanks to everybody from Centrepoint for joining us in this hour, but also for joining the Tortoise Network. It sounds to me as if there's a lot that we can dig into here. Mitak, if you kept a diary, did you keep a diary while that you based your book on?
Yep. So the diary became the book.
Okay.
Are
you still keeping a diary?
Yep, I'm currently writing the part 2 and 4 other books at the moment. So yeah. Fantastic.
Well, look, thanks again all for joining us, and do please stay with us for the rest of the hour if you want to listen, maybe find out a little bit more about what Tortoise does. We do a lot of things in a lot of spaces on a lot of different subjects, and I'm going to do what my colleague James calls a handbrake turn now, and switch to COVID, because it's what we're all living through. And how far away are we from the 19th now? About a week, yeah? When we're all going to open up. And my colleague Paul, today in The Sense Maker, did a little bit of original research on whether or not the link between COVID infection and hospitalization has been broken. Paul, tell us what you found.
Thanks, Giles. You may have overstated how original it is, but the starting point was Prime Minister Boris Johnson switching from saying that the link between COVID infections and hospital admissions has been broken to saying it's been weakened. And I found that interesting because obviously it has enormous implications for what happens after the 19th. So we spoke for The Sense Maker today to a public health professor called Martin McKee, who said things can only get worse after that date. And the logic is really straightforward. So we took the data on infections and hospital admissions and found that obviously vaccines have weakened that link that Boris Johnson initially said was broken to a really, really, really significant and important degree. So, in the start of the second wave, you had about 8-9% of infections resulting in hospitalizations, whereas now it's about 3%. So dramatic fall, and vaccines are the main reason for that. But the government, after the 19th, is in effect letting the denominator of that ratio, so infections, grow. And if they grow to a high enough level, then obviously it will compensate for a smaller ratio. So at the moment you have 3% of 30,000 infections a day. But Sajid Javid said infections may rise or will likely rise to about 100,000 over the summer. So then you're doing 3% of 100,000, which would be 3,000, obviously. And that's a level of hospitalizations that we last saw in the second wave. So it's a big number. It's a big number of daily hospital admissions.
So where does the story go? What do we do besides say I told you so if after July 19th hospital wards fill up, waiting lists for other treatments get longer? What do we do next? I'm sort of struggling to see how we, as a Slow Newsroom, can anticipate and ask the right questions.
I think that's a really good question, and I will buy myself some time to think of an answer by saying that what you would hope for as a policymaker is that vaccine uptake does the opposite of what it's been doing over the past few days and actually tick up, because uptake, there are sort of pockets of England where uptake is really low. I mean, really, really low. And there are age groups, of course, younger ones, where uptake is also low. So I'd want, as a policymaker, to see that change. As a journalist, I'd want to understand why it's moving in that direction and why those pockets of resistance and hesitancy exist. And another thing I would be interested in as a journalist is reporting from some of these wards. So one thing we didn't have the space to cover in the SenseMaker is the fact that the case fatality rate has also fallen. So the link between infections and hospitalizations has fallen, but the next link in the chain to deaths has also been weakened. So those people who are presenting in hospital with symptoms are much less likely to die now. And that's got to be a very different environment for NHS staff.
Yeah, two thoughts occur to me. One is that our colleague, Zav Greenwood, has mentioned a couple of times in the past that we should be reporting from these wards. Access is clearly a logistical challenge. I know that, Zav, you have contacts in the health service. I'm wondering how we should all be leveraging those contacts, because clearly that's where the rubber hits the road. And it may be that we find out that experience gained in how to treat the disease, greater resistance to it as a result of being vaccinated, even among those who are hospitalized, means that the crisis that what Johnson would call the doomsayers forecast doesn't come to pass.
Maybe, but I mean, another thing you need to think about is, of course, doctors aren't only treating COVID patients.
Right.
And at the end of the day, what we say in the SenseMaker is that while the government gets the user ratio, so the link between hospital admissions and infections, medics deal in absolute numbers. And if those absolute numbers are rising, even if the case fatality rate is falling, it still overloads the system. And as people have said, that has implications for people who need cancer care, who are suffering from other illnesses, terminal, acute, whatever. So, however you cut it, there will be some form of crisis.
Yeah, well, Liz, hi Liz, is saying in the chat that major London hospitals have been told to prep for a major third wave in August. And Megan, can we come to you, Megan Kenyon? Low uptake among young people. Are you saying, Megan, that this is...
Sorry?
Megan, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, which is great. And I can see you out of the corner of my eye, which is weird. And what I can't do is read and talk at the same time. So explain what you've said in the chat about young people and vaccine uptake.
Yeah, sorry, I've just got back off a run, so I'm a bit flustered. But basically...
Yeah, but you're a regular. We're always going to come to you.
Yeah. A few friends of mine have... Sorry, my phone is like... Hang on. A few friends of mine had...
Megan, we're going to have to come back to you. We do want to.
And then when they've tried to, can't get it until, obviously.
All right. Megan, we'll come back to you. While you're getting your phone sorted out, I want to come to Zav, because you've made a point about intervals, I think, between first and second doses. And I'm going to quote you, 12 weeks as the norm is silly, silly, silly. It's a terrific headline. What does it mean? Zav, can we come to you? Do you want to run too? What's happened to Zav? No, oh, never mind. That's fine. Let's try going back to Megan. I'm sorry, I'm really putting our tech team on the spot here, having to zoom around. If we can't reach any of our youngsters...
Hello, sorry.
That's all right, Megan. Is our link stable now? We can see you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, terrific.
Yeah, so basically, I've got a few friends who've had COVID, and then when they tried to get their vaccine, they've been told you have to wait until 30 days after you've had, like, recovered from the virus. And obviously, COVID is quite, you know, there's a lot of COVID in young people at the moment. They're kind of the biggest group that are with infections. So I wonder whether that's a factor in the low uptake of the vaccine among young people, because they're kind of, you know, getting the virus, but then because they've had the virus, there's got to be a gap between them getting the vaccine. And also now we've reached the time where young people are, like, you know, sort of actually in the queue to get it. So yeah, I don't know whether that's a factor in low uptake, and therefore, you know, it's kind of like a vicious circle, because then, you know, there's more infection because there's less vaccine as well.
Megan, do you know, is there supposed to be an epidemiological reason for that interval between having had it and having the first dose? I hadn't heard of that before.
Yeah, I don't know why that is, but yeah, probably is, but yeah, I just know that you can't have the vaccine until 30 days if you've had COVID, until 30 days after you've recovered. But yeah.
Interesting. Okay. And all right, Zav, we couldn't find you, but we've noted that it's pretty lively in the chat about the interval between first and second doses. And certainly from my family's perspective, 12 weeks is being a real problem. Just before we leave COVID, can we come to Andrew Girdwood? Because you made a point about severing a different kind of link. Andrew, can you explain what you meant?
The link between people being infected and mutations. So I mean, I think all the forecasts agree a lot more people are going to become affected by COVID, infected as well. And Bojo's position is it's fine because he won't die. You know, but it's not fine if that furnace of viral action creates other variants which turn out to be immune to the vaccine. And I'm not surprised about the government, because I don't think they've got any choice. I'm a bit surprised that mainstream media don't seem to push this. Sorry, I just said the phrase mainstream media, and I feel dirty for Trump supporter now. Sorry, media don't seem to push this, because to me, I'm either overestimating it, or it's such an obvious one that it should be challenged. Are we not creating the next strain deliberately?
Well, the question here is whether the vaccinated are still a petri dish for mutation, right? As I understand it, the unvaccinated are a much livelier, hotter, more dangerous petri dish. I'm sorry to lump millions of people into that phrase, but is that your understanding, or have I misunderstood that?
I'd only guess. I mean, I had heard, but I've not verified, that you can be vaccinated and still a carrier, still develop it, but you can even get COVID, but just to a lesser extent, right?
Yeah.
So I think, again, I'm overreaching my knowledge here, but the conditions for biological mutation are not nullified by the vaccine. In fact, arguably, you've introduced another agent that actively evolves itself with the infection, and surely that creates
Yeah, it's a really good question, Andrew, and it's one that I'm going to ask Paul to answer for next week, because rather than guess, and if there are any epidemiologists on the call, please tell us. Let's find out what's happened to that link between vaccination and mutation. Let us, while there's still time, move on to the related subject of the origins of COVID, which is the subject of our Slow Newscast this week, which has been worked on by Kerry and Poppy Sebag Montefiore, who I think very patiently has stayed with us on the call. Poppy, thank you for joining us. Look, first of all, for people who haven't had a chance to listen to the podcast, do. It's not only important, but it's a thriller too. We haven't quite answered the question yet, Poppy, have we, about the origins of the virus, but just tell us briefly what you see as the reason we did the podcast, and also can you explain, and I don't think we can give a spoiler alert if necessary, why is it so key that Yanling and Yanjing are different people?
Okay, well, to answer your first question first, I think we were really interested in doing the podcast because the origin question of whether the coronavirus leaked from a lab in Wuhan suddenly became quite a hot subject, and it had started off. We thought in the Western press by Trump, when he was saying this is the Chinese virus and there's a leak from Wuhan, and then the Chinese started saying no, we got it from the frozen food which were imported from other countries, or you brought it to the Wuhan Games, and there was this kind of nationalistic argument about who started this. But then Trump left. But that theory didn't leave. Biden continued with the lab leak. He's sent some the US intelligence officers to do this 90-day research mission to see if it was a lab leak. So, it was really interesting that crossed from the Republicans to the Democrats. And not only that, but the scientific community, which had initially been really thought that the lab leak seemed really implausible. More and more scientists were actually beginning to come out and say, well, actually, looking at a lot of the circumstantial evidence, it is plausible. Let's put it on the table. And the WHO did this mission to China, which was a bit of a whitewash, and it came out with that saying the lab leak looked not that plausible. But then a few weeks later, the head of the WHO kind of made this extra statement saying, actually, we're leaving it on the table. We're leaving the lab leak theory on the table. So it's just this really curious thing that it's getting a bit more traction, the lab leak theory. So we wanted to look into seeing why that was.
And then you spent quite a lot of time in the podcast analysing one particular photograph. Why was that?
Yeah, we did. Because what we saw that we thought was really interesting was this rumour about the lab leak did not begin with Trump. Way before Trump suggested it, it was on the Chinese media, Chinese social media. So somebody had posted a thread in February 2020. So while the virus was still in China, it hasn't started to spike in Italy. It was very early in the pandemic. Someone in China posted something that said, one of the researchers at the Wuhan Institute of Virology is COVID patient 0. Her name's Huang Yanling. Look out for her. This is where it all began. And there was. So it went totally viral. Everyone on the Chinese media was like, who is this? How can we find her? Bring her out. We want to meet her. She needs to come out. We need to see antibody tests if you're going to deny this. And the Wuhan lab just put out a statement very simply the next day saying Huang Yanling was a master's student at our lab. But she left in 2015 and she's not returned. So end of story. And a company in Sichuan said, yep, she works for us and she's fine and she doesn't have COVID, she's alive and well. End of story. But other weird things started to happen, like the Wuhan lab has photos of every single graduate student they've ever had. And then hers was suddenly disappeared. Her photo disappeared. and nobody could find her, and they weren't bringing out her antibody results. She didn't appear on TV or anything. There was some WeChats of her saying, I'm fine, and ignore any emails, they're not true. And then this photo appeared of a group photo taken at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the date stamped on it was 2018. And there she was, circled in red. Someone had printed her name, Huang Yanling. So then people were like, look, you said she left in 2015, but here she is in 2018. And so we thought, we heard that in America, they were really interested in her, like a lot of the Republican committee, a big health body that had been funding the lab had taken away the grant for the lab and said that they would reinstate it if they could explain why Huang Yanling had disappeared. So this rumor had started to affect American policy. And so we thought, well, this photo of her, we should see if it really is her, and if this photo really is taken in 2018, because if it is her in 2018, then the Wuhan lab story is obviously not true. So we looked at this photo, and we had a huge amount of problems because it's such a sensitive subject in China right now. Nobody in China would talk to us about it. And we tried to send some journalists who I've worked with before and really trust, and out to Wuhan to see if they would, they could go for us. But actually they thought they might, and then they realized actually they just weren't comfortable to do it. Like, they weren't comfortable to do it. They weren't comfortable to put other people in that position to talk. So there was like this, we couldn't really get people to speak to us. So, but what was really useful about this photo was that there were two people in the photo who were clearly not Chinese. So I thought if I could find one of them, they might feel freer to talk to us about this picture. So I looked at which other countries the Wuhan Institute was partnered with in 2018. And
you were doing all this from the UK. Where are you now?
Yeah, I'm in London. Yeah. Okay. I was doing it from a lot of it from self-isolation because I got pinged by Track and Trace. But yeah, Poppy,
I want to interrupt because actually I've been thinking while you're talking. And
don't spoil it, yeah.
I don't think I do want you to give it all away.
No.
Because it's a great piece of journalism, and I would encourage people to sort of consume it as it was intended to be consumed. But let me ask you though, where do we go from here? Let's just suppose, let's put aside the lab leak theory and suppose that we go back and focus on a zoonotic crossover event. We're no nearer, 14 months in to knowing where that might have taken place than we were before that WHO mission went to China. Is that right?
Yeah.
And if so, who's looking? Whose research should we be following now? Is the so-called Batwoman back at work?
Yeah, I think she's probably really hard at it, definitely. But I think the WHO, as you'll hear in the podcast, they feel like they've just put some kind of pillars in place to begin what they think is going to be years and years of research to try and get to this beginning of this story. And they say if you look at SARS, the 2002 to 2004 SARS, we had this idea quite early on that it came from a civet cat, but actually it took like 14 years or something. It took years to realize that the civet cat got it from a bat. So it does take a long time to find the cause of these things. And, we're just really caught up in this, our kind of quick information that we want to know now, but actually it's quite unlikely that we will know for quite a long time. And the World Health Organization are just prepared to take this very slowly.
That's really a salutary reminder because we've got used to things moving very fast, not least the creation of vaccines much faster than usual. So we tendency to assume that we would get at the truth of the origin of the virus equally quickly, but point taken, we might not. Still, when it becomes safe to travel again, I think it'd be a great subject to report with boots on the ground. And I did notice a few weeks ago, an old Times reporter now with the Wall Street Journal, Jeremy Page, on his bike, riding up into the bat caves where many people still believe the virus originated, and he was turned back and questioned for 5 hours. I don't know if you saw that piece. It was also a good read. Poppy, thank you very much for joining us. And before we run out of time, I can sort of feel in my bones now that we're not really going to have time to come to Love Island. I know it's an important subject, and I'm saying that with a completely straight face, because even though I cannot bring myself to watch it, I think a lot of psychological damage is being done, and there's a big question, which we will report in all seriousness, whether ITV is doing enough to look after the people who they've cast in that show when they are thrown to the wolves, as it were. But we're only 48 hours barely after England was defeated in the final of the Euros, and because of the nature of that defeat, those 48 hours have been filled with despicable unpleasantness, but also some really moving demonstrations of solidarity and support for the 3 young strikers who missed their penalties. And we quoted Marcus Rashford's status at length in this morning's Sensemaker. But again, I'm wondering where we go from here, apart from to Qatar for the World Cup. We've even got people in the room who know about this. Marks and Andrew. What do you what I mean, first of all, Mark, do you feel that on balance some good came of that defeat in the form of the support shown, let's face it, not just by fans and communities, but by the Red Tops?
I mean, kind of. You've got to remember that all of that stuff that's posted, all the racial hate speech stuff, is a minority group of people. It's a fraction of the people on the platforms, and the messages get artificially amplified. So it's great that it highlights the issue. And some of the Red Tops I know, I think it was the Sun's taking quite a lot of stick this week because it published its "We're backing you" front page, and a lot of people took issue with that because they were like, well, you're backing this today, that doesn't make up for 25 years of what you have been doing. So it's, I guess, what came of it, the good stuff that came of it is it's highlighted the issue. I think the danger is it sends us off on a lot of quite unhelpful cul-de-sacs in terms of addressing the issue. So already there is talk of things like social media companies bringing in things like ID cards for people to set up a profile as a way to combat it. And the history of Twitter and other social media platforms is littered with all sorts of schemes to try and root out bad actors who publish hate speech and illegal content on their platforms, and none of them really are very effective because they don't treat the source of the issue. There was a lot of talk made about, it can't be left up to algorithms because algorithms have proven to have biases. Twitter actually turned Microsoft's AI chatbot into a racist within about 24 hours, right? That was the famous one. And so everyone was like, okay, so you can't have algorithms, you need to have human moderators. Facebook's had human moderators since 2015. And there's no real sort of, you don't have to go far on Facebook to still find hate speech, racist content and everything else, because human moderators can't keep up with the post. I mean, there's something like 6,000 tweets posted every second. There's not enough people on the planet to moderate that. So I guess the roundabout point I'm making is that social media does not make racism, and looking to social media for solutions to combat it and fix it, you're not going to get very far very fast.
Yeah. But how do you measure it, right? Because you make the argument that it's providing a megaphone for racists, but the counter argument, and I was talking with my colleague Nimo, I don't know if you're in the room, Nimo, still, is that what you're looking at in the abuse directed at Rashford and others is not an amplification of a very small of racism from a small source, but the tip of an iceberg. Nimo, are you around?
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
I'm sorry that it's not Love Island, but I know that you have views on this too. You were explaining to me that you don't see it as a megaphone at all, or at least not only as that.
What do you mean, like in terms of?
Well, as I was just saying, when the racism that you saw on Sunday night and Monday directed at Rashford and the others is not the abuse of a small number amplified by Twitter so much as the tip of an iceberg. And if you go looking, unfortunately, it is representative of what a lot of people are feeling and articulating.
Yeah,
Is that right?
I definitely don't think that this is as tiny a minority as a lot of us would like to think, especially since there has been obviously a huge wave of solidarity and support, like you said earlier, like with that Marcus Rashford mural that was graffitied, and then like all of that amazing support that came out from the local community. So like this I don't think it's like a zero-sum game where like to suggest that there are a lot of people who share these views and who were actually saying really quite horrible and vile and racist things on social media, and probably, you know, just outside in real life as well. That doesn't negate from the fact that there are also people who are supporting these three players. But I just think that, yeah, I do not think that it is a tiny minority that these opinions are on some kind of fringe. And I think having that opinion if the last few years have not shown us anything, it's that a lot of these opinions aren't fringe, and a lot of these views aren't fringe, and these events kind of allow for, like, kind of give is a bit of a catalyst for these views to kind of really come out to the fore. But that doesn't mean that they weren't always there.
Yeah, I fear this is all too true. But on Friday at lunchtime, we're going to devote an hour to the potential of social media either to amplify or mask this kind of thing. So do join us for a continuation of that conversation. I've written down a lot of things that we need to pursue, including, especially in the first half hour, the problems that young homeless people are facing and that are being dealt with, at least to the extent possible, by Centrepoint. I think we should definitely ask Morgan if he's got time to come on in with Mitak, if possible, share with us your diaries, your research, and we will report on that. We also, I think, need to find a way. I'm not sure if I'm barking up the wrong tree with whether it's helpful or not to measure this racism, to get a sense of the scale of the problem. Nimo seems all too clear in her own mind that it's structural, that it's with us, but I hope not for good. We've got to find out a way, a strategy for tackling it head on, it seems to me, between now and the World Cup or going forward. I mean, the dispiriting thing is that the ongoing campaigns for respect and against racism in football appear not to have worked. Question, why? We'll try to get into that. Thank you all very much for joining us. And from the hyper-hybrid newsroom on Berners Street, we hope to do this again and with more and more people in the room. Thank you very much.